Okay, let's just jump right in. What if the single biggest idea in modern medicine, the one that says germs make us sick, is just wrong? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into a book that makes that exact radical claim. What really makes you ill? So, to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to walk through it in 5 parts. First, we'll look at how the book questions the very foundations of medicine. Then, we'll get into what it says germs really are. After that, we'll uncover the book's culprit for illness, put modern medicine itself under the microscope, and finally ask that huge question, who actually benefits from all this? All right, so the whole argument in this book really kicks off by going after one of the absolute pillars of modern medicine, the germ theory. The author's stance here is pretty blunt. They're saying the idea that tiny germs cause infectious diseases isn't just a flawed theory. It's a dogma that was never actually proven. This really sets the stage for a completely different way of thinking about why we get sick. So, you might be asking, how do they even begin to build this case? Well, it starts with language. The book argues that the very words we use in medicine have been changed over time to support a theory they believe is totally wrong. Let's start with the word virus. According to the book, it didn't originally mean some kind of infectious particle at all. Instead, it meant poison or some kind of contaminant. They point to old texts where virus was used to describe things like the pus from a sore, which makes sense since its Latin root means noxious substance. And it's the same story for the word infection. The book claims it used to just mean contamination, like poisoning, not the invasion of a germ. So the idea here is that putting pus into a cut isn't introducing a tiny invader, it's just polluting the body. It's a complete reframing. This whole reevaluation thing applies to bacteria too. The book says they aren't the bad guys causing the damage. Nope, they're more like a cleanup crew that only shows up after the tissue is already damaged. It even quotes a physician saying bacteria attack and devour the weakened, injured, and dead cells. So in this view, bacteria are a consequence of disease, not the cause. Okay, so if it's not germs, if it's not bacteria or viruses, then what on earth does this book say is the real reason we get sick? Well, the book's answer is actually pretty simple. It boils down to one single overarching idea: toxicity. Now, this is a crucial point. The book argues that all those symptoms we think of as being sick, the fever, the inflammation, the coughing, that's not the disease. That's actually your body's solution. It's your body fighting to heal itself by kicking out all that poisonous junk. And here's where it gets really specific. This table shows how the book tries to connect some famous diseases to very specific chemical exposures, taking germs completely out of the picture. For example, it presents research claiming that mad cow disease, or BSE, wasn't caused by a weird protein, but by a chemical insecticide that was poured directly onto cattle. From there, the book takes this whole toxin theory and turns it on modern medicine itself, arguing that a lot of our so-called cures are actually just adding to the body's toxic load. The author claims that vaccines don't actually prevent disease. Instead, they just introduce more harmful stuff directly into the body. And as a piece of evidence, the book points to things like government compensation programs for vaccine injuries, basically framing that as a quiet admission that, yeah, these things can cause harm. The critique doesn't stop there. It goes on to pharmaceuticals, which the book says don't really cure anything. They just suppress your symptoms while causing all sorts of other problems. The thinking is, hey, if you put a drug into your bloodstream, it's going to go everywhere and mess with your body's natural balance. The book gives some pretty pointed examples, saying that a lot of common medicines are actually working against what your body's trying to do. For instance, it claims that antibiotics get their miraculous results not by killing bacteria, but by basically whipping your glands into a frenzy to deal with the toxicity of the drug itself. So this all leads to the book's final and maybe biggest claim, that this entire flawed medical system isn't an accident. It's kept in place on purpose, for profit and for control. Right at the center of this claim is this idea of powerful, hidden, vested interests. According to the book, these are the groups that are pulling the strings, shaping the entire medical system to serve their own goals. So how do they pull this off? Well, the book lays out this whole 4-step playbook for how these interests supposedly keep control and make sure no other ideas get any airtime. And get this, it even quotes a former editor of The Lancet, a huge medical journal, who apparently said that journals have basically become information laundering operations for the pharmaceutical industry. Wow. And these are the specific groups the author calls out as the ones who benefit from a system that, in this view, is designed to manage sickness, not actually make people healthy. The book ties all these groups together into what it calls an imperial project. So let's wrap this up. The core argument of this book is that we need to throw out germ theory and replace it with a toxin theory. It claims that disease isn't caused by germs attacking us, but instead it's our body's natural, healthy reaction to being overloaded with poisons from the world around us. Ultimately, the perspective in this book really forces you to question just about everything we've been taught about why we get sick. And it leaves you with a really provocative question to think about. What are the real foundations of health? And is our modern world the cause of our sickness, or is it the cure?